Hey guys, welcome to the Check-In podcast brought to you by the Awaken Nights podcast network. As always, you're joined by your host, Caleb Hansey from Awaken Church Wollongong. This week on the podcast, we are blessed to have an incredible guest with us from my movement of churches, a good friend of mine. We've connected over the last couple of years and really learned some stuff from each other. He's a great guy, all the way from the Goldie up in Queensland. We're joined by Bishop Tom Otto, joining us all the way from the Goldie.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, man. Doing well. As you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube or video, my isolation hair beard is getting there. It's
beautiful.
It's luscious, it's heavy, and it's thick. It's all the things of the Holy Spirit and the anointing that you want. So I'm just following along. So
I love it.
For many of us listening or watching, like myself, I know who you are. I know what you do. Some people that are friends of yours listening might know. But for those that don't, maybe just intro yourself. Say a little hello, let the people know where you work, what do you do, and maybe what your passions are, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sweet. First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a huge honor to be here with you and with the people that are signing in. My name is Tom. I'm 24. I live on the Gold Coast here in Burleigh. It has just gotten really, really cold. So it's a good change of pace from the heat that is normally up here. You've experienced that a few times. It gets very hot, but it's good. I'm the youth pastor here at XTRA Youth under the church called COH Church, and my parents, Brad and Kim Otto. It's good. I've been basically in church, my whole life. They've been, the senior pastors of a church before I was born. So it's been an incredible experience to grow up under that sort of leadership and influence. I have a degree in civil engineering. Wow. And work as a geotechnical engineer part-time, and then also on staff at the church part-time here at Co. So love what I do, and just really blessed to be on the podcast with you this morning.
Your life sounds pretty crazy, my friend. I remember learning for the first time when I met you that you had that degree in engineering, and I was like, wow, he's smarter than me. So that's fantastic. I will note too, for the people watching on video or YouTube, that I was pretty shocked when you joined the call today that you had is that the Patagonia jumper that you had?
Patagonia, yes. Yes.
Sorry, correct, Patagonia. I believe in the Gold Coast you can wear the Patagonia jumper 2 or 3 times a year. Is that correct? It's a give or take. It's not many.
Yeah, no, it's not many at all. And today I'm literally only doing it because most of my shirt's in the wash. Yeah. And, we've got to keep that. We've got to keep a clean cut.
Yeah, right. I appreciate that. Thank you for putting on your Sunday best for the podcast, mate.
No worries, mate. I'm here for that.
Yeah. No, well, we're in for a great topic here on the podcast. As always, we've been getting some guests on lately on the check-in and talking about all things ministry. So we've had a couple of them talking about people that have joined fresh to a role, and we had a couple of guests in for that one. We've had someone come in and talk about doing ministry in a smaller or rural area, as well as groups and the benefits of that. And today what we want to talk about is actually creative content. And I think it's a really interesting talking point. For those that didn't hear it before, Tom mentioned he's from a youth ministry called XTRA Youth. And if you don't follow them on Instagram, we'll probably tag that or link that into the description of the video for you to do that, because it's relevant to what we're talking about. They do an excellent job, and I'm not just saying that because he's a guest, it's the reason he's on here, of having such creative content that's getting out there to people, that's engaging, that's relevant, that's eye-catching, aesthetically pleasing, but also Christ-focused, which I think is crucial for a church ministry. And so we thought we'd get Tom on to actually just answer some questions and have a discussion with him about why is creative content actually important? How are some ways we can do that if we're really rookies to it? Someone like myself, I'm not a creative person. I'm not great at that sort of stuff. How do we actually get out there and make some of this content? And then really, what is the balance to it with, like, hey, that looks sick, but also it's got to be relevant to being a youth ministry or church or whatever it may be. And so we hope this is relevant to you guys listening. I'd encourage you, if you have questions about it after the podcast, please go and message Tom or get in contact with him if you want to learn a bit more. Don't come up to me. I don't know anything. I have a Canva account that's free, and that's all I use. So that Canva.
That's where it all starts.
That Canva, come on the pod. I can't be bothered to give you a premium account, so I haven't even paid you for that. But if you want to give me a premium account, that would be fantastic. So shout out Canva. We're gonna shoot it over to you first. The first thing I want to kind of talk about is, why do you think creative content is actually important for churches? And kind of for someone who doesn't even know what that is, what is creative content? in your understanding?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really a great question, especially for the times that we're in now, because creative content is at the forefront of basically everything that we do. And essentially, for most churches, not all of them, but for most of them, if you don't have a online presence or creative content out right now, in some ways you don't really exist because of the fact that we can't meet together.
Right.
So, one of the things, I think there's two main things that just define creative content, and that would be information, and it would also be an aspect of art as well. That's what at the crux of it, at the center of it, that's what creative content is. And so it's the strategy of what to release at what time and the blend of both of those, how you use that to ultimately, if you're a Christian and in church, to point people towards Jesus. That's the goal of what we're doing for our online presence and creating content for people. We're creating content for them to have a connection, make a connection with Jesus. That's what we do. So, we're in a world where suddenly, this is now so prevalent. I think it's awesome to see that the church during this season has actually advanced in some ways. Churches have been preparing for this, whether they knew this was coming or not, for years and years. You look at Elevation Worship, you look at Bethel, those big churches have been doing live recordings for close to 6-7 years now, so maybe even more. So it's really interesting to see that right now creative content is a big focus of a lot of churches, but I think it also asks different questions about temperance and how we deal with that. So creative content in church is information and a blend of art, and we're pushing it to see people get closer to Jesus.
Great. One of the follow-up questions I'll just have for that on that topic that you're talking about. Obviously, I've briefly, for the most part, followed your journey of overseeing XTRA Youth and all that sort of stuff, and even the name change to that obviously was something that you put thought into and gone, hey, this is something we want to reach by making the name relevant and all that sort of stuff. So for those that don't know, it's not like extra, like I'm getting an extra pack of peanuts from the shop.
Extra gum.
It's extra like XTRA. I've got that right, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Extra, and so it's like shortened, it's relevant, and it's like for people that are maybe a bit older, you're kind of like, what's the point? Just name it extra. But everything that you did, for the most part, had a reason and a purpose behind it to connect with a certain demographic. And so obviously, if you're listening, your demographic, if you're a business or you're in leadership or you're a senior minister and you're reaching a different sort of demographic, it probably will be different than what Tom's reaching for the most part. But kind of what was your reasoning for going into that journey of wanting to improve your creative content? So you started out and you maybe saw some things you were doing and took inspiration from someone else potentially, and went, hey, and maybe just share with the listeners and the viewers, why did you do some of the things you did, and where did you start to get that inspiration from when you began?
Yeah, cool. So I'm coming on to 5 years now as a youth pastor. Before I was a youth pastor, I was a youth leader underneath Pete Sykes and then Cody Thompson, which some of the viewers might know of in the movement. And, now he runs a, website company and started off as a graphic designer. So most of my influence, comes from him at the initial stages, because he set such a great platform and online presence for us when I was just a youth leader.
Yeah.
And so when I took on the youth team, it took me a few months, maybe 6 months to a year to really realize, the buck actually stops with me now. And so what is, coming out of Southland Youth at the time was a reflection of, my leadership. And so I think I would have been over in New Zealand for Shout Conference. And I remember coming into an event and we just had no graphic design. So I put out something. I learnt Photoshop for an event. And then, just created something, and that sort of just sparked this, I guess, passion that I didn't know I had for creating stuff like that. So for XTRA and the whole motive behind that was, it was good to rebrand at some stage. I think it was hard for some of the kids to understand what's a Southland, and it's sort of like a Hillsong, name. If you don't have the brand behind Hillsong name sounds a little bit not weird, but it just sounds like, what is that?
Yeah.
They don't know. But because of the image that they've created behind Hillsong, the brand they have, when you hear Hillsong, you think of church, you think of Jesus, you think of Brian and Bobby, you think of great music. This is what you think of. So we wanted to create an image and create a brand for youth ministry that reflected our community. So, the reason behind XTRA is we saw a verse we're meditating on as a team. It's in Matthew 5, verses 30. I think it's definitely Matthew 5, and it talks about going the extra mile, giving up your coat for others. If someone slaps you on the cheek, you turn the other one. So it's just, we wanted to see a youth movement of young people that identified with being a Christian and being extra.
Yeah, great.
So that sort of sparked that journey. And to be honest, like we didn't really know what we were doing. We just sort of went along with the journey, and it's still evolving. And I think your image should always reflect the community that you're in. And so, that will change one day, but for the meantime, it is a certain way, and you can see that in the creative content that we put out. I think for us, there's three things that are principal when it came to creative content that we always mark ourselves against, and especially coming into this online experience. A lot of youth ministries move the whole ministry online. And so we just wanted a few things to temper ourselves with, because it's really easy to get lost in the social media world.
Yeah.
And those things where we want to be a youth ministry of continuance. So we're going to be in there for the long haul. We don't know how long this is going to last for. So we want to pace ourselves. We want to be consistent with what we're doing. So, when it comes to putting out content, we wouldn't just going to be sporadic about it. We're going to be purposeful in what we put out.
Right.
And the last one was just everything that we did, it has to have connection. That's the end point. If it doesn't have connection with anyone and you're just putting content out there, it's going to become white noise, and you're not actually, pointing people to Jesus. So that's the case. We're going to readjust. We're going to change gears, and we're going to look at it from a different angle. But we just didn't want to let kids get distracted by so many other voices out there. We're going to put our content in their hands on their phones, because we know there's a lot of other content that is asking for their attention right now. So how can we do that?
Great. That's awesome. I didn't know those three things that you had done, and you can see in your ministry in this season that's prevalent for me. I can see that. I actually also didn't know that that's where XTRA came from. I didn't know that story, so the verse and stuff. So that's new to me. So, and can I just say too, for someone who's interacted with your youth ministry, your kids and your leaders, having been with you guys a couple of times, but recently in January at Summer Blitz, and spend a week with you guys, that idea of going the extra mile is something that carries into your youth ministry and your leaders and these. So I love that your creative content has actually got a mission behind it. I think that's one of the things we got you on to talk about, was, that you can see that your creative content is not just there so that you have a presence online, but it's got a goal behind what you're doing, and it's feeding into your vision. It's not a separate vision. And I think that's something that maybe some people really needed to hear today about that particular thing. So the next talking point I want to go into is a little bit more practical. Like I said earlier, I'm not creative. I have the free Canva account, and we're talking, if it isn't Canva account, it's Google Paint. I mean, it's Microsoft Paint we're looking on. I don't know. I'm never wired that way. There's people in my ministry that I've had around me that are. I'm not, but I'm always willing to learn. And there's been things that you guys have done that I've seen that I've gone, how do they do that? Like, where'd that come from? Where do they get? Even recently with your live streams for youth ministry at XTRA, you've got you guys hosting, and then you've got shout out Caleb Paletti as a producer on the screen in the corner, seeing his face, and you've got the chat coming up on the screen, and all those things are part of this creative content that are engaging the listeners and the viewers, that just had to come from somewhere. There's things that you're learning, you're growing in, and so. For those that are starting out, like myself, rookies, novices, nobodies, know nothing, whatever it may be, what are some practical tips you can give for free things they can use, paid subscriptions if they want to do that, if they have the money in their youth ministry or young adult ministry to do it? What are some things they can grab a hold of that maybe you've used or are using to help boost their creative content?
Yeah, I love it. I'd say the first thing is that everyone is called to be creative. We're all called creative. And whether you like doing graphic design or that's your passion, and if it's not, maybe, as you said, Caleb, it's probably not your passion to do creative design. However, everyone is still called to be creative. You might be the person actually making the content, whether you're sharing a message, you're dancing, you are singing, you're creating a worship set, whatever you're doing, a leadership talk, a podcast, that's all creative content as well. And I think when it comes to creative content online, we immediately look at like graphic designers and stuff and go, oh, we need those people because that's our advertisement. And that is true. We do need those people 100%. But I think as a, rookie, as a novice, as someone, starting out, I think the best thing that you can do if you're a leader is to create creative spaces for your people. So, really just pushing them towards their passion of what they love doing. If it is taking, photographs on a Friday night, push them in that direction. They might not want to do the video editing, but they are great at taking photos. So push them in the passion that they have. And that's what helped me at the very start. I was fortunate that I was passionate about doing graphic design. I'd stay up late. I loved it. I wouldn't mind getting no sleep because I just loved creating those things just for the sake of creating. And what can I create for this Friday night? How can I make this a moment? That was, I think, the grace that was on my life at that point. But what helped me was that there was different leaders and different young people around me that were feeding the content to me. So it was photographs. It was, doing pranks with kids. It was, you name it. There's heaps of different things. And having an expectation for excellence. And I know you guys touched on this last week with shout out Dan and David. Great podcast. And, I think it was Dan that said, we don't want perfection. We just want excellence. And it's true. We just want the best that you can do. And that is going to be more than enough for us. So that's when it comes to our YouTube live on a Friday night, where like, that's their expectation. What can we do? And I think that really inspires creativity when you're comparing yourself. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is, you can't compare yourself to other people.
Great. Come on.
They have different resources. They have different leaders. They have a different community. So the moment that you start comparing yourself to other people, the content they're putting out, you lead yourself down a very dangerous track. So, after a Friday night, we've all fallen into the trap, as if you're a youth pastor listening to this, a youth leader, looking at other youth ministries and how they did on a Friday night. That can kill your creativity because now you're trying to force something that shouldn't fit. You're trying to force a image. You're trying to force a brand. Trying to force even creating something like someone else. It's not going to work out. You're going to burn yourself out. So can't compare yourself when it comes to this. I think, as I said before, creating from or for the community that you are called to. Our community here in Pack Pines, we have 3 state schools and a private school in the radius of 3 kilometers of us. And we have 2 or 3 skate parks, and it is just a community that lives and breathes skating and that style, that lifestyle, whether you're male or female. You drive through Pack Pines, you see those kids. So we wanted to reflect that image, so our image on Instagram and Facebook is more of that underground grunge sort of image that we've reflected. So now when kids look at our posts, they see themselves in there, they can relate, not just in photos, but the style and the aesthetic of it. They go, well, that's who I am. So we're reflecting the community that we're in. And I'd say lastly, the best thing you can do is collaborate with people. You can't do it all by yourself, and having a fresh perspective or fresh eyes on the content you're creating, if you're stuck, is gonna speed up your process a lot, and it's gonna be a big help to you.
Right. That's awesome. I love all that stuff, and I think, especially the thing about comparing, I think it's so relevant right now. And look, especially, how easy it is right now in this season to just go and watch 4 different church services on the one. You get 2 hours, watch 5 church services on a Sunday, and go, oh wow, they're doing better than I am, and they're doing this, and Friday night they did this, and maybe we should do that. And I think it's important when you be creative and be putting out content that's relevant to your community is what's key there. So I love that. Do you have any quick, maybe some of the stuff that you use, if it's Photoshop, if it's this, if it's some of the stuff you maybe started with, and maybe some of the stuff you're using now, if you just want to list them quickly. We might even put up a document to go along with the podcast on our socials and maybe give some of this stuff out there for people to get on board with. So
yeah, love it. I think some of the free resources that you can definitely use is use a photographer on a Friday night. That is the basis of all of our content. Everyone has a phone, so you can take great images on any of the new phones that are out there. So get a photographer, get a kid taking photos, get a leader taking photos if you can. Child safe. Let's be safe about this whole thing. Even though the laws are way looser in Queensland, in the other states in Australia, like you got to have that restriction. There's multiple filters and apps you can download for that. Fujifilm and Visco if you're just doing a quick edit.
Visco girl, is that you? Is it?
Visco girl, you know about it. Shout out to the Visco girls out there. Unsplash is a website with royalty-free photos that you can use.
Right.
You want an Abstract photo, you want a background. That's our go-to with basically everything that we do. For editing videos, we do Video Leap, Mojo, Unfold, and Nietzsche. Those are different apps that we download. They're all free to use. I think one of them is like a little bit of a subscription, like $1 a month or something like that, but they're basically free. We use a lot of different fonts. I think what people don't recognize is that you got to have like fonts to use. Like you can't use Courier or whatever it is, and Arial. So we use defont.com and Fonto. That's an app for your phone. And then we use FreePic, Adobe, Photoshop, and Fiverr for different editing platforms. Some of those are subscription based and they cost money. However, they're really, really good. That's the basis of what we use on a Friday.
Yeah, cool. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. So just for people that are listening, they kind of, and I'll go through and list some of those and put them in a document just to break it down. People that are, listening on our Instagram, Facebook, and all that sort of stuff, that want to check that out and just look more into those things. Can I say too, really quickly before we move on, if you were a youth leader or a youth pastor or a young adults pastor and you do want to grow in this stuff, and Tom's just listed a couple things, and maybe you do reach a certain point and you're like, hey, I can't do anymore. I don't have the resources. I need to get some of these Adobes and Photoshops if I want to do that. Couple ways just to encourage you to do anything that you want to do to get out of your reach. If it's something that's in your plan and it's important to you guys, budget for it, do a fundraise for it. Go and speak to your senior pastor and say, hey, we want to do this. Is there any money you guys can spare to help us out with that? And you might even find that the church is looking to you to go, hey, we want to improve our creative content. And then it allows that church to have the subscription so they can start putting out more incredible movies and pictures and stuff like that. So explore your avenues. Please don't sit there and go, oh, my youth ministry's got X amount of people, or my young adult ministry's got not enough people. I can't afford to get that. If it's a monetary thing, fundraise, go to your church, seek the finances from somewhere. And if it comes down to it, just pray to God and ask that he's going to bless you with finance, because he will in certain ways if it's a pure heart thing to increase the kingdom. So
definitely.
But that kind of leads us into our next thing, because I think creative content sometimes can just be all about the youth ministry looking cool. And, the heart behind it sometimes is like, wow, I want to be a cooler looking youth pastor or a cooler looking young adult ministry or whatever than the one that's down the street. And if my young adult ministry is cooler, or my youth ministry looks cooler on socials or videos, they'll leave their youth ministry and come to mine. And that's, sometimes we have this heart and we don't mean to. And I think sometimes we go into it and go, wow, that last video was fire. They're going to leave their youth ministry, and this Friday we're going to have 600 people. And this is where our heads are at, right? So the talking point I want to kind of get into to wrap up this discussion on creative content is, where's the balance in your head between something that's beautifully aesthetically pleasing, catching to the eye, engaging, meeting the needs of your community connection, and the other side of that balance is actually putting a Christ-centered, focused message out there and allowing it not to just be a fun youth ministry or a social hangout club, but something that actually portrays the message of Christ and the Holy Spirit. So when you're creating content, how do you balance that? Into it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, great question. I think, as you said, there's a balance between something that's aesthetically pleasing and then something that's Christ-centered.
Yeah.
I think if you were too hardcore and Christ-centered, it'd become sometimes offensive to people. On our page, we have a lot of community kids that follow our page. So if we were just posting Jesus all day, there's only so much you can take before it's, you move on. It's white noise. And the same with aesthetically pleasing stuff. Is your mission just to have a great feed? If so, like, you're going to reap what you sow there as well.
Yeah.
As you said, there is a balance. And I think when you're creating, you got to be creative. We mark ourselves against those three things that I said at the start of the podcast. If it's not connecting and the end result is that you're just putting stuff out there for clout, then we got to readjust, because at the end of the day, we're posting so that young people can have a connection with Jesus on whatever platform that is. Right now, for our online presence, we got something coming out each day. There's a lot of aesthetically pleasing content that are there. However, what we've done is we've said we want to be a positive influence in, positive voice in these young people's lives. If we can create a platform or content for them that they can connect with, then it's more likely they're going to end up in our connect groups, and it's more likely they're going to end up in our youth service on a Friday night and hear the message of Jesus. If we can get them to a service and hear the message of Jesus and they encounter the Holy Spirit and worship, then we've had successful content during the week. Right. I think where it becomes skewed is when you have when you deceive people, when you're deceiving them with the content, you're putting out a false image. And I think there's an incredible story that Chad Veach tells. He was out as a young pastor in a small town, and before they asked him to preach on the night before, they had advertised that Michael Jackson was going to be performing at their youth ministry. And so the flyers went out, the content went out, and thousands of young people rocked up to this youth event. And the MC comes out and he's like, "Hey guys, we've got a special guest tonight, King of Pop, MJ, he's going to come out and perform for us tonight." And he said, "So can you please welcome Michael Jackson?" And lo and behold, the youth pastor walks out with a wig and a suit and is dressed as Michael Jackson. And his first opening statement is, "I'm going to talk to you about Jesus." Now, you have just deceived everybody in that room. Yeah. So you got to ask yourself, is what I'm putting out actually going to tell the truth about my youth ministry when someone rocks up? Yeah. I'd hate it if a young person rolled into our youth ministry, saw a post of ours and went, "This isn't what I thought it was," and then resent everything else in the rest of the night. So when it comes to putting out something aesthetically pleasing, we've got to actually, first of all, know that is what we're putting out truthful, and is it directing people to Christ? It is that balance, and you've got to find your own sort of values behind what you're putting out as well. Yeah,
great. Look, next time you guys get Michael Jackson at your youth ministry, I probably won't. Just know that it's going to be you coming out in a wig and gloves. I probably won't do that. But I wish, look, to be honest, man, I wish I knew this stuff. I wish I heard this when I was a youth pastor. We had an event that I ran when the first year I took over youth ministry in 2015. And I made the mistake because I just didn't understand creative content, or I didn't know some of the stuff, and just what you're talking about, deceiving young people. I made the mistake of putting on an event. It was an outreach event. We had a certain budget, and we just put on a massive outreach event for our region, and it was huge. And I made the mistake of accidentally putting the Facebook event under my name instead of the youth ministry name, which for those that wouldn't be aware, once kids go on to look at this and find an event and get invited to it, to them it looked like a house party with inflatables and whatever it was. And I didn't even mention, "Hey, we're doing this message," or it was like, "Come to this awesome thing, it's free, you get popcorn, you get this, you get inflatables, you get dinner, you get blah, blah, blah." And we had 200 kids turn up, which for us was massive, and we were stoked, and it was unbelievable. And I had so many complaints that night from parents, and non-church kids and you're brainwashing us. And so 100%, I'm fully on board with that message. It was one of the worst nights of my life as a youth pastor. So
we've all been there. I think, we've all been there when we've posted a photo that looks like we've got 100 kids or the whole entire auditorium is filled, and you've just taken it on an angle that makes it look like that, when in reality you only got 5% of your auditorium filled. Yeah. So that's always the enticing factor behind what we're doing. And so that'll never go away. I think, as you said, we've got to be checking ourselves and putting up stuff that's truthful.
We appreciate all those answers. Like I said earlier, if you want to know more about creative content, if this is stirring you a little bit, get in contact with Bishop Tom Otto, who will give you some advice on that. If you can't get in contact with him, or you don't know him or don't have him on socials, message me, message the podcast socials, and we'll direct you the right way to do that. But one of the things we like to do on the check-in every single time as we're finishing is we like to extend out some rapid-fire questions. We like to get to know our guests a little bit more. We like to give some shout-outs to their city. We like to pick their brain a little bit in isolation, and it's a fun way to end the check-in podcast. So we're going to ask Tom some quick questions. He's going to answer them really quickly, and then we're going to say goodbye and get out of here as we wrap up. But question number one, we're in isolation at the moment. We're kind of stuck inside. You're in Queensland. The borders are shut at this point, or they're loosening up. But we're spending a lot more time inside our houses. So as for you, what are you currently listening to? What are you reading? What are you finding is helping you grow? If it's a video game, shout out a video game. Whatever it is you want to say, what are you doing right now to grow? What are you watching, listening to, or reading?
Yeah, I love it. Shout out Call of Duty. I am listening to I listen to Jensen Franklin and Bishop TD Jakes. Come on. Not the Bishop Tom, the Bishop TD. His old school stuff. I love his old school stuff that he puts out. I'm reading a book at the moment from that was gifted to me at Christmas time called Lead Like a Shepherd by Larry Osborne, I think it is. And I generally have a few on the go just because I like to temper what I'm reading with non-Christian stuff, I guess, as well. So I'm reading Disney's World. It's an autobiography on Walt Disney. It's really interesting.
Right.
So that's good. And I finished a book on John Bevere called Drawing Near. That was a great book.
Great book. Yeah, I read that one. Yeah, good stuff. Awesome. Second question. At the moment, like I said, not comparing, we're not getting into it, but we are having the ability to listen to other church podcasts, watching other churches, whatever it may be. Are there any churches maybe in isolation or out of isolation that you've been watching just to kind of listen to and grow from their ministry? And are there any church podcasts that you listen to regularly from preachers that you like?
Yeah. So for looking at other churches, I'm actually quite strict on myself that I don't look at many, just because I feel like with my creative process, if I see something and I really like it, I want to immediately recreate it. Yeah. And so for me in my creative process, I've got to come up with myself and it be that originality. Otherwise, I have a tendency to go, that looks awesome, we've got to do that. Yeah. And so for me, I try and keep it really closed. I think, you can't escape it. We've got, Stephen Furtick and what he's doing online on Facebook and stuff. So I'd say if anyone was popping up on my feed the most, it'd be, Elevation Church and what they're doing. Yeah. We've got a church here on the coast called COH Church, which I follow, and they put out some great stuff. And Bethel, I love what they're doing. They're really genuine. They're doing more of Feel Like We Are acoustic because we can't have a full band on. So I love those guys. Shout out COH Youth. I love what they're putting out at the moment. They're doing an incredible job. So I follow them and they're doing a great job. For people that I'm listening to, Bishop and Jensen Franklin. I love both those guys. And Chad Veach. Chad Veach is my man.
True. Chad Veach's Leadership Lean podcast is fantastic. For those that haven't listened, go and check it out. It's awesome. So third question, really quickly. We want to travel. We want to get out of here. We're in isolation. What's your top travel destination right now? Where do you want to go?
Canada.
Shout
out Canada. Cool. Love the lakes. Have you
been there before? Have you been to Canada before?
No, I haven't. I've been to Colorado. So once I went there, I was like, I heard Canada was way better. So I was like, well, if Colorado's this good, Canada got to be good.
I think you're the second guest on the check-in that has mentioned Canada. So Canada's getting a lot of love after isolation. So
They are.
book your flights, Vancouver, here we come.
Justin Bieber, here we come.
Justin Bieber, here we come. Let us stay at your family's house. Shout out Justin Bieber, come on the pod.
Please.
So last question. Best coffee or food shout out in your city or town? Now, look, you're a Burleigh boy. You're surfing. You've come out of the surf. You're walking over. Where you going? What are you getting? What's the shout out you're putting out?
Love it. I am walking straight out of the surf and I'm going to Tiger Easy Coffee Cafe.
Come on.
They are right next to Cold Rock on the Burleigh Esplanade there. And they do, I'm not kidding, they do the best donuts I've ever had in my life.
Wow. Okay.
Where was your favourite when you came to the coast?
Wow. That's a huge... I think I went to more cafes on the coast than I do in my own town. That's like... There's cafes everywhere on the coast.
Went to a few.
Where's the one we go to that has the deconstructed iced coffee?
That is Social Brew on James Street.
Shout out. Then there was the one we went to... what's the big one with like... It's almost like on a... Looks like a farm, sort of. It's not...
Yeah.
Taylor. What's it called?
The Paddock?
Paddock. Shout out the Paddock. Brilliant coffee. And amazing pastries. And then we went to one with you and your sister before I went to the airport, which was also quite good.
Where did we go? I can't remember. Was it Blackboard Coffee?
No, but I have been there. That's good too. Actually, no, sorry. I want to take everything back. Blackboard Coffee is the number one shout out. And Tom Otto gifted me with some beans on the way back from the airport, some coffee beans, and I brought them home. Brilliant. I made some awesome coffees with that when I got home. So, we should just do a podcast on Gold Coast coffee joints. We could.
Let's do it.
We should. So,
let's do it.
I want to say thank you for coming on. We've appreciated it. I think it's going to help a lot of people that are kind of picking their brains in the season about that stuff. So we thank you heaps. Do you want to say anything before you leave to the people?
Love you guys. Hope that your ministry or whatever you're doing, if it's in the business world or youth ministry, this can help at least in some point. And I just want to say thank you again for having me on the podcast. What you're doing in these different episodes is just incredible. And I think the people that are listening to it are very blessed, and the people that you've had on of incredible quality. So I'm really excited for what you put out. I'm listening to them, and shout out this pod.
Thank you.
Get on it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening, guys. We hope you have a great week. And as always, remember, join us next time. Be watching the Netflix parties if you want to join in on those podcasts and listen to the movie reviews that come out every Tuesday or Wednesday. And we'll see you next time on the check-in. Remember, enjoy the night. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.